This video contains audio content only. There are no visual elements or images accompanying the audio. If you're expecting to see video footage, please note that this is an intentional audio-only presentation. We recommend listening to this content rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding and enjoy the audio. Welcome. Ever wondered about the connection between racial segregation and fetishization? This article breaks down this complex topic in easy-to-understand language. We'll explore the historical roots of fetishization, how it manifests in modern society, and the impact it has on individuals and communities. Get ready to uncover the hidden language of fetishization, understand its psychological impact, and discover how we can challenge these harmful dynamics. Let's dive in and build a future where race is celebrated, not commodified. Chapter 1. The Shadow of Colonialism. The story of racial fetishization isn't a modern phenomenon born from the digital age. It's a tale as old as the exploitative systems of colonialism, a dark shadow cast across centuries, shaping perceptions of race, sexuality, and desire. Colonialism, driven by an insatiable hunger for power and resources, didn't just claim territories, it claimed bodies and minds, twisting perceptions of the other into grotesque caricatures that served to justify oppression and exploitation. The dehumanization of people of color was central to this project. Consider the brutal history of slavery, where African bodies were literally commodified. Torn from their homelands, stripped of their identities, and reduced to chattel, enslaved Africans were subjected to a dehumanizing gaze that saw them not as individuals, but as objects to be bought, sold, and exploited for profit. The slave auction, a public spectacle of dehumanization, saw enslaved men displayed naked, their bodies scrutinized and evaluated based on racist assumptions about their physical strength and reproductive capacity. Even the most intimate aspects of their being, such as the size of their genitalia, became subject to the white slave owners' scientific curiosity, a perverse obsession that served to further dehumanize and control. This legacy of objectification, the reduction of a person to their body parts, casts a long shadow, influencing the way black bodies are perceived and desired even today. But the objectification wasn't limited to black bodies. The colonization of the mind was just as insidious, twisting Western perceptions of the East into a distorted fantasy known as Orientalism. This ideology, fueled by a mix of fascination and fear, painted entire cultures with a single, reductive brush. Asian women, for instance, were exoticized and stereotyped as submissive, docile creatures, inherently obedient and eager to please white men. This wasn't just a matter of personal preference. It was a carefully constructed narrative that served to justify Western imperialism and the exploitation of Asian lands and peoples. These Orientalist fantasies were woven into the very fabric of Western culture, perpetuated through art, literature, music, and even opera. Think of the countless paintings depicting nude Arab women in harems, their gaze fixed seductively on the, presumably white, viewer, reinforcing the stereotype of the exotic, available, other. Or consider the enduring popularity of operas like Madame Butterfly, a tragic tale of a Japanese geisha's unwavering devotion to her white American lover, culminating in her suicide upon his betrayal. These artistic representations weren't just harmless entertainment. They were powerful tools of cultural propaganda, reinforcing Orientalist stereotypes and normalizing the fetishization of Asian women. This process of othering extended beyond the realm of sexuality. Colonial powers meticulously cataloged the customs, beliefs, and social structures of colonized peoples, often twisting them into evidence of their supposed inferiority. Cultural practices were labeled as primitive or barbaric, religious beliefs dismissed as pagan or savage, and social structures deemed inherently flawed. This wasn't just about understanding different cultures, it was about creating a hierarchy, placing Western civilization at the top and justifying the subjugation of all others. The fetishization of different racial groups often took distinct forms, reflecting the specific power dynamics and historical contexts at play. Black women, for example, were often hypersexualized and stereotyped as promiscuous Jezebels, a trope that served to justify their sexual exploitation during slavery and beyond. This stereotype stands in stark contrast to the image of the asexual, nurturing, mammy, another reductive caricature that denied black women their full humanity. Black men, on the other hand, were often portrayed as either hyper-masculine, aggressive, brutes, or emasculated, subservient figures, both stereotypes designed to control and contain their perceived threat to white supremacy. These contrasting images, though seemingly contradictory, served the same purpose: to deny black people their individuality and reinforce their subordinate status within the colonial hierarchy. The fetishization of Asian men, while less prominent than that of Asian women, also played a role in reinforcing racial stereotypes. Often depicted as effeminate or asexual, Asian men were denied the dominant masculinity valued within Western culture, further justifying their subordinate position within the colonial power structure. This stereotype, perpetuated through media and social interactions, contributed to the marginalization of Asian men within the dating world and beyond. Latinx women, too, faced their own set of stereotypes, often being hyper-feminized and exoticized as fiery, passionate temptresses, a caricature that reduced them to their sexuality and ignored their diverse experiences and identities. These historical roots of racial fetishization continue to shape contemporary perceptions of race and sexuality. The stereotypes and power dynamics established during colonialism haven't simply vanished. They've seeped into the cultural subconscious, influencing the way we see and interact with each other. The exotic other continues to be fetishized, whether on dating apps, in pornography, or in everyday social interactions. The legacy of Orientalism lives on in the continued objectification of Asian women, the hypersexualization of black bodies, and the countless other ways in which racial stereotypes continue to circulate and reinforce existing power structures. Understanding these historical roots is not just an academic exercise. It's a crucial step towards dismantling the harmful stereotypes and desires that continue to shape our world. By confronting the past, we can begin to build a future where race is no longer a commodity, a fetish, or a justification for oppression, but a celebration of our shared humanity. Chapter 2: The Burden of Exoticism. Karina Chan, a young Asian American woman, was excited to explore the dating scene outside her Bay Area bubble. She met a man who seemed perfect on paper, charming, intelligent, and genuinely interested in her. But during an intimate moment, her dream date turned into a nightmare. He demanded she speak in a language she didn't know any sexy words in, simply because he was kind of into that. Chan's initial reaction was a mixture of confusion and awkward laughter. She tried to brush it off as a quirky request, but the feeling of being reduced to a caricature, a prop in his exotic fantasy, lingered. The incident chipped away at her self-worth. It wasn't just the request itself, but the underlying message. Her value lay not in her intelligence, her humor, or her personality, but in her ability to fulfill his racially charged fantasy. The experience left her questioning her desirability, not just to him, but to others. It sowed seeds of doubt that would impact future relationships, making her hyper-aware of men's motivations and wary of any attention that felt even remotely fetishizing. She found herself constantly analyzing interactions, searching for hidden agendas, and struggling to trust that she was being seen for who she was, rather than for her race. A black woman shared how, in the world of online dating, she felt like a commodity, her value determined by the degree to which she conformed to stereotypical expectations of black femininity. She described the dehumanizing experience of being solicited with explicit references to racial fetishes, reducing her to a hypersexualized caricature, a thing to be consumed rather than a person to be known. She recounted the emotional toll of constantly being asked intrusive questions about her body, her hair, and her supposed sexual prowess, reinforcing the feeling that she was being seen not for who she was, but for the color of her skin and the stereotypes associated with it. A Latino man described the frustration of being constantly complimented on his exotic looks, while his intelligence and personality were overlooked. He shared how these seemingly harmless compliments, though intended as flattery, chipped away at his sense of self-worth, reinforcing the feeling that he was valued only for his physical appearance, not for his mind or his character. He recounted instances where he was solicited with stereotypical requests, reinforcing the feeling that he was being seen not as an individual, but as a representative of his race, a walking embodiment of someone else's preconceived notions about Latinx men. Even within marginalized communities, the burden of fetishization is felt acutely. A gay Asian man described the emotional rollercoaster of navigating a dating world where he was either completely ignored or excessively fetishized. He shared the pain of being told he wasn't someone's type simply because of his race, while simultaneously being pursued by men who saw him as an exotic prize, a symbol of their supposed open-mindedness. This double bind left him feeling perpetually othered, caught between invisibility and hypervisibility, never quite sure where he fit in. He described the psychological toll of this constant objectification, the way it eroded his self-esteem and made it difficult to form genuine connections, always wondering if he was being seen for who he was or simply for his race. The constant awareness of being fetishized creates a heavy emotional burden, impacting self-esteem, mental health, and the ability to form healthy relationships. It erodes trust, making it difficult to discern genuine interest from fetishizing gazes. It fuels self-doubt, making individuals question their own value and desirability. It creates a sense of isolation, reinforcing the feeling of being perpetually on the outside, never quite belonging. The psychological consequences of fetishization are far-reaching. The constant objectification can lead to anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges. It can make it difficult to form healthy relationships, as individuals struggle to trust others and differentiate genuine connection from fetishizing desires. The internalized pressure to conform to stereotypes can lead to body image issues, eating disorders, and a distorted sense of self. The constant awareness of being fetishized can also make individuals hypervigilant, constantly analyzing social interactions and searching for hidden agendas, creating a sense of unease and insecurity that permeates all aspects of their lives. These microaggressions, these seemingly small, everyday instances of fetishization, accumulate over time, creating a significant emotional burden. The intrusive questions, the backhanded compliments, the stereotypical requests, they all chip away at an individual's sense of self, reinforcing the message that their race precedes their individuality. These interactions, though often dismissed as harmless or even complimentary, contribute to a pervasive sense of being othered, of being seen not as a person, but as a representative of their race, a projection of someone else's fantasy. Racial fetishization isn't just a matter of personal preference, it's a systemic issue rooted in the historical legacies of colonialism, Orientalism, and white supremacy. It's a form of racism that objectifies, dehumanizes, and perpetuates harmful stereotypes. It's a burden that weighs heavily on those who are fetishized, impacting their emotional well-being, their mental health, and their ability to navigate the world with a sense of safety, belonging, and self-worth. These stories, these lived experiences, are a testament to the profound and lasting impact of racial fetishization, a stark reminder that the fight for racial justice must include a fight against the objectification and dehumanization of people of color. Chapter 3. Beyond Preference, Unmasking the Language of Fetishization. We often talk about attraction in terms of preference, as if our desires are as simple as choosing between coffee and tea. But when it comes to romantic attraction, especially across racial lines, the language we use is rarely neutral. The word preference itself can become a smokescreen, obscuring the insidious ways in which racist ideologies shape our desires. It allows us to dismiss the historical and social context of race, reducing individuals to a collection of physical traits and cultural stereotypes. Consider the seemingly harmless phrase, "I only date Asian girls." On the surface, it sounds like a personal choice, no different from preferring tall partners or those with a good sense of humor. But this statement, and others like it, reinforces a system where certain racial groups are deemed inherently more desirable than others. It perpetuates the hyperfeminization of Asian women, reducing them to their perceived submissiveness, docility, and exotic allure. It transforms them into objects of a specific kind of male gaze, one that seeks not a partner, but a fantasy. The flip side of this coin is the equally harmful phrase, "I'm just not attracted to Asian guys." This statement contributes to the emasculation of Asian men, reinforcing the stereotype that they are less masculine, less desirable, and less worthy of romantic interest than their white counterparts. It perpetuates a hierarchy of desirability, where whiteness is the default and all other races are measured against it. This can have a devastating impact on Asian men's self-esteem and sense of belonging, reinforcing the feeling of being perpetually othered within a society that values white masculinity above all else. But the language of fetishization extends far beyond these explicit statements of preference. Terms like exotic, spicy, and jungle fever may seem like playful compliments, but they carry a heavy historical baggage. Exotic implies otherness, foreignness, and a distance from the white norm. It transforms individuals into objects of curiosity, to be admired for their difference, but never fully understood or accepted. The initial validation gave way to a deep sense of unease, the unsettling realization that she was being seen not as a person, but as a projection of someone else's fantasy. Spicy and jungle fever, on the other hand, hypersexualize individuals from specific racial groups, reducing them to their perceived sexual prowess. These terms, rooted in racist stereotypes and colonial fantasies, perpetuate the notion that certain races are inherently more passionate, more uninhibited, and more sexually available than others. They transform individuals into objects of sexual consumption, denying them their full humanity and reinforcing harmful power dynamics. A black woman shared how these terms, often used in online dating profiles and unsolicited messages, made her feel like a commodity, her value determined solely by her perceived ability to fulfill someone else's racialized sexual fantasy. This language of fetishization isn't just about individual words or phrases, it's about the underlying ideology of minimal race. This ideology allows individuals to justify their racial preferences as mere aesthetic choices, as if skin color, hair texture, and facial features are no different from height or eye color. It ignores the social and historical context of race, the ways in which certain racial groups have been systematically dehumanized, objectified, and commodified throughout history. It perpetuates a color-blind approach that denies the existence of racial bias and allows racism to flourish under the guise of personal preference. The concept of minimal race was evident in the justifications offered by men who expressed a preference for Asian women. They argued that it was no different from preferring blondes or brunettes, failing to acknowledge the historical and social context that makes race a significantly different category. They saw their desire as purely aesthetic, ignoring the ways in which their preference reinforced harmful stereotypes and perpetuated a system of racialized desire. This ideology is particularly harmful in the context of online dating, where algorithms often reinforce these biases. If a dating app user consistently swipes right on profiles of a certain race, the algorithm learns to prioritize those profiles, creating a feedback loop that reinforces existing preferences and limits exposure to diverse individuals. This can create echo chambers of desire, where users are only presented with potential partners who conform to their pre-existing racial biases. A gay Asian man shared his experience of navigating a dating world where he was either completely ignored or excessively fetishized, highlighting the double bind faced by many racial minorities in online dating. Men of color on dating apps often face the dehumanizing experience of being reduced to stereotypes. A Latino man described the frustration of being constantly complimented on his exotic looks, while his intelligence and personality were overlooked. He felt reduced to a caricature, a walking embodiment of someone else's preconceived notions about Latinx men. A black man shared how he felt like a walking black dildo, his value determined solely by his perceived sexual prowess, a stereotype rooted in centuries of racist objectification. These men's experiences highlight the emotional toll of being constantly objectified and reduced to stereotypes, the way it erodes self-esteem and makes it difficult to form genuine connections. These anecdotes, these lived experiences, paint a stark picture of the harmful impact of the language we use around attraction and desire. They highlight the emotional burden of constantly being reduced to a stereotype, a commodity, a thing. They underscore the urgent need to move beyond the language of preference and acknowledge the ways in which racist ideologies shape our desires. By understanding the nuances of this language, by recognizing how preference can be a smokescreen for prejudice, and by actively challenging the stereotypes that fuel racial fetishization, we can begin to dismantle the harmful frameworks that perpetuate racial inequality in the dating world and beyond. We can create a culture where individuals are valued for their full humanity, rather than reduced to their race or their perceived ability to fulfill someone else's fantasy. This is not just about being politically correct, it's about recognizing the profound and lasting impact of language on real people's lives. It's about creating a world where attraction is based on genuine connection and mutual respect, rather than on the distorted lens of racial fetishization. Chapter 4. The Algorithm of Attraction. The promise of connection, a digital Cupid's arrow guiding us toward love and companionship. That's the seductive allure of the modern dating app. But beneath the glossy interface and carefully curated profiles lurks a less romantic reality: the algorithm of attraction, a complex system that often reinforces racial biases and perpetuates the dehumanizing practice of fetishization. These algorithms, designed to predict attraction and attractiveness, often operate on a foundation of white, heteronormative standards, creating echo chambers of desire that reflect and amplify existing societal biases. One of the primary ways dating apps perpetuate these biases is through the very mechanics of their matching algorithms. Designed to maximize compatibility, these algorithms often prioritize matching users with others of similar racial backgrounds. This creates a digital version of homophily, the tendency for people to associate with others like themselves. While this may seem like a harmless way to increase the likelihood of connection, it effectively creates echo chambers, reinforcing pre-existing biases and limiting opportunities for interracial connection. Imagine a white user who expresses openness to dating people of all races. The app's algorithm, however, might still prioritize showing them profiles of other white users, simply because those matches are statistically more likely to result in a mutual like. This algorithmic bias, even when unintentional, can lead to a homogenization of dating pools, reinforcing the idea that certain racial groups are inherently more desirable than others. This algorithmic bias is further compounded by design choices that prioritize visual profiles and offer features like racial preference filters. While these features may seem like they offer users greater control over their dating experience, they can actually reinforce the objectification of certain racial groups. A user might, for example, use a racial filter to specifically seek out Asian women, reducing them to their racial identity rather than seeing them as individuals with unique personalities, interests, and experiences. The profit motive of dating apps further complicates the issue. These platforms are businesses, and their algorithms are designed to maximize engagement and revenue. This can lead to the amplification of racial fetishization, as the algorithms prioritize content and matches that are likely to generate clicks and swipes, regardless of their ethical implications. An OkCupid study revealed this bias in stark terms, showing that users rated Asian men and black women as less attractive than their counterparts. This data reflects and reinforces deeply rooted historical and contemporary biases, contributing to the marginalization of these groups in the online dating world. A dating app might, for instance, promote profiles of users from fetishized groups, even if those users haven't actively sought such attention, simply because those profiles tend to generate more activity and engagement on the platform. This pursuit of profit, at the expense of ethical considerations, can create a hostile environment for those who are reduced to objects of fetishization. The experiences of black women on dating apps offer a particularly poignant illustration of this dynamic. Often the least desired demographic, they are subjected to both overt racism and insidious fetishization. If they are deemed desirable, it is often because of their perceived otherness or exoticism, reducing them to stereotypes and denying them their individuality. One black woman shared her experience of feeling like a commodity in the online dating world, her value determined by how well she conformed to stereotypical expectations of black femininity. She described the dehumanizing experience of being solicited with explicit references to racial fetishes, reducing her to a thing to be consumed rather than a person to be known. The dehumanizing effects of fetishization extend beyond any single racial group. A gay Asian man described the emotional toll of navigating a dating landscape where he was either completely ignored or excessively fetishized, caught between invisibility and the objectifying gaze of those who saw him as an exotic prize. Another Asian American woman recounted how a date's seemingly innocuous request that she speak a different language during sex left her feeling deeply dehumanized, reduced to a mere object in his racialized fantasy. The stories shared by these individuals are not isolated incidents. They reveal a systemic problem within the online dating world, one that is deeply intertwined with the historical legacies of colonialism, Orientalism, and white supremacy. These systems, built on the dehumanization and objectification of people of color, continue to shape perceptions of race, sexuality, and desire in the digital age. The algorithms, design choices, and profit motives of dating apps often converge to create a toxic environment where racial biases are amplified and fetishization is normalized. The pursuit of a curated dating experience, facilitated by racial preference filters and algorithms that prioritize similar racial backgrounds, can inadvertently contribute to the problem. While these features may seem like they offer users greater control, they can also create echo chambers of desire, limiting exposure to diverse individuals and reinforcing pre-existing biases. The emphasis on visual profiles can further exacerbate fetishization, reducing individuals to their physical appearance and reinforcing the objectification of certain racial groups. The profit motive, driving the design of algorithms that prioritize engagement and revenue, can amplify these biases. Content and matches that reinforce racial stereotypes and fetishes may generate more clicks and swipes, leading to their prioritization by the platform, even if it means perpetuating harmful stereotypes and objectifying individuals. This pursuit of profit, at the expense of ethical considerations, can create a hostile environment for those who are reduced to commodities or exotic prizes in the online dating marketplace. These stories are a powerful reminder that racial fetishization is not a harmless preference. It is a form of racism that has real and lasting consequences. Holding dating platforms accountable for their role in perpetuating these harms is crucial. Increased transparency about how their algorithms work, improved safety protocols for reporting and addressing instances of racism and fetishization, and legitimate feedback mechanisms that allow users to voice their concerns are essential steps toward creating a more equitable and respectful online dating environment. Beyond these technical and design changes, however, a deeper cultural shift is needed, one that challenges the underlying ideologies and stereotypes that fuel racial fetishization. Only then can we hope to create a digital landscape where individuals are valued for their full humanity, rather than reduced to their race or their perceived ability to fulfill someone else's fantasy. Chapter 5. Building Bridges, Not Walls. Actionable Pathways Toward Equity. The journey toward dismantling racial fetishization and cultivating equitable relationships demands a multifaceted approach, one that confronts individual biases, systemic inequalities, and the insidious ways they intertwine. Education, critical self-reflection, and a commitment to challenging harmful representations are not just abstract ideals. They are actionable pathways toward a more just and respectful future. Education begins with looking inward. We must critically examine our own preferences and assumptions, peeling back the layers of cultural conditioning to uncover the roots of our desires. This requires more than just passive introspection. It demands active engagement with our own dating patterns, the language we use to describe people of different races, and the types of compliments we give. Reflecting on these seemingly mundane aspects of our lives can reveal uncomfortable truths about our internalized biases. Do we find ourselves consistently drawn to partners of a particular race? Do we describe people of color using exoticizing or stereotypical language? Do our compliments focus solely on physical attributes, reinforcing the objectification of certain racial groups? Honest answers to these questions can be the first step toward dismantling the harmful frameworks that fuel fetishization. One Asian American woman, reflecting on her dating experiences, realized she had unconsciously internalized the stereotype of Asian women as submissive and exotic. This realization prompted her to actively challenge this bias, seeking out relationships that valued her intelligence, her humor, and her personality, rather than just her race. A Latino man, tired of being reduced to his exotic looks, began to challenge the compliments he received, steering conversations toward his interests and accomplishments, reclaiming his individuality from the objectifying gaze. Beyond individual self-reflection, challenging stereotypical portrayals of people of color in media is essential. Media, including pornography, plays a powerful role in shaping our perceptions of race and sexuality. Harmful stereotypes, often rooted in the historical legacies of colonialism and white supremacy, continue to circulate and reinforce existing power structures. The hypersexualization of black women, the emasculation of Asian men, the exoticization of Latinx individuals. These are not just harmless tropes. They are dehumanizing caricatures that perpetuate harmful biases and contribute to real-world discrimination. One concrete example of this dynamic can be seen in the pervasive stereotype of Asian women as submissive and sexually available. This stereotype, rooted in the history of Orientalism and the exploitation of Asian women during wartime, continues to be perpetuated through pornography and other forms of media. This hypersexualization contributes to the fetishization of Asian women, making them targets of unwanted attention and harassment, both online and offline. One Asian American woman shared her experience of being bombarded with fetishizing messages on dating apps, reducing her to a racialized fantasy rather than a person. Another harmful stereotype is the portrayal of black men as hyper-masculine and aggressive. This stereotype, rooted in the history of slavery and the fear of black male sexuality, continues to fuel the fetishization of black men, reducing them to their perceived sexual prowess and denying them their full humanity. One black man shared how he felt like a walking black dildo in the online dating world, his value determined solely by his perceived ability to fulfill someone else's racialized sexual fantasy. Challenging these harmful stereotypes requires more than just pointing them out. It demands actively promoting diverse and nuanced representations of people of color in media. This means supporting creators who are committed to telling authentic stories, amplifying the voices of marginalized communities, and holding media institutions accountable for perpetuating harmful tropes. It also means engaging in critical conversations about the media we consume, challenging our own assumptions, and educating others about the harmful impact of stereotypes. Within the BDSM community, the intersection of race and power dynamics takes on a unique dimension. Research reveals that people of color in these spaces often face heightened levels of discrimination and fetishization. One study found that people of color were significantly more likely to report feeling discriminated against and fetishized at BDSM events. Participants shared troubling stories of overt racism, offensive slurs, microaggressions, feelings of isolation, and being dismissed or minimized. One person of color described feeling like an exotic other in the BDSM community, their value determined solely by their race. Another shared the experience of being solicited with racially charged requests, reinforcing the feeling of being reduced to a stereotype. Increasing inclusivity within the BDSM community requires concrete action. Diversifying leadership roles, implementing anti-discrimination policies, and creating spaces for open dialogue about race and fetishization are crucial steps. Organizations can also educate members about the harmful impact of fetishization and provide resources for those who have experienced discrimination. Creating a culture of accountability, where racist behavior is not tolerated and individuals are held responsible for their actions, is essential. Holding dating apps accountable for their role in perpetuating racial biases is equally crucial. Transparency in algorithms is a necessary first step. Users have a right to know how these algorithms work, what factors influence their matches, and how their data is being used. Stricter moderation policies are also needed to address racist behavior on these platforms. This could include banning users who engage in racial harassment or discrimination, as well as implementing systems for reporting and addressing instances of fetishization. User feedback plays a vital role in shaping platform design. Dating apps should actively solicit feedback from users from marginalized communities, listening to their concerns and incorporating their perspectives into the design and development of new features. Beyond these systemic changes, individuals can take concrete steps to foster more equitable and respectful relationships. Engaging in difficult conversations about race and attraction with friends and family is a crucial starting point. This means challenging racist jokes or comments, educating others about the harmful impact of fetishization, and creating space for open and honest dialogue. Actively seeking out diverse social circles can broaden our perspectives and challenge our own biases. Supporting organizations that advocate for racial justice, both financially and through volunteer work, can contribute to systemic change. The concept of shared humanity is not just an abstract ideal, it is a powerful framework for building bridges across racial divides. Recognizing the interconnectedness of our experiences, the ways in which our lives are shaped by shared struggles and triumphs, can lead to greater empathy and understanding. Listening to the stories of those who have been fetishized, acknowledging their pain and their resilience, can help us to see beyond stereotypes and recognize the full humanity of each individual. One Asian American woman, after sharing her experience of being fetishized, found solace and validation in the support she received from friends and family who listened to her story and affirmed her worth. Building a future free from racial fetishization requires a collective effort, a commitment to challenging our own biases, holding institutions accountable, and fostering a culture of empathy and respect. It requires that we build bridges, not walls, creating a world where attraction is based on genuine connection, not on the color of someone's skin. Racial fetishization, deeply rooted in colonialism and perpetuated by media and algorithms, inflicts significant emotional harm, reducing individuals to stereotypes and commodities. Challenging this requires critical self-reflection, disrupting harmful narratives, and holding platforms accountable. These findings illuminate the insidious nature of racial bias and its impact on interpersonal relationships. Further research could explore the intersection of fetishization with other forms of discrimination. This knowledge empowers us to build more equitable and respectful connections. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Subscribe for more discussions on important social issues. Let's continue learning and growing together.